Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're going to put on our hard hats and act as bridge builders. Think about it. Every business transformation, every system rollout, or even just a process upgrade, it's all essentially a bridge, right? You're connecting this chaotic, kind of inefficient current state to a streamlined, successful future state. But look, you can't just start pouring concrete without a blueprint. And that is exactly where our analysis tools come in. We're going to master the Builder's Toolkit for requirements analysis. This is going to give you the exact methods to make sure the solutions you're building actually solve the right problems and, deliver real, tangible value to your customers.
All right, here's our blueprint for today's explainer. First, what is requirements analysis? Second, conducting a gap analysis. Third, finding the root cause. Fourth, visualizing processes with BPMN. And finally, number 5, the requirements lifecycle.
Okay, let's jump right in. Section 1, what is requirements analysis?
Moving right along to Section 2, conducting a gap analysis.
So, requirements analysis. This kicks in right after your initial data elicitation phase. Basically, you've gathered all this initial data, but now you actually have to make sense of it. You've got to analyze it to uncover what your customers actually need, not just what they say they want. So to build our bridge, we have to know exactly where we're standing right now and exactly where we're trying to go. We do this by conducting a gap analysis, which is an iterative cycle of 4 distinct steps. First up, we capture the current state. How are things working today? Second, we devise the future state, which is our final destination. Third, we identify the exact gaps between those two realities, really looking at the impact and the effort it's going to take to fix them. And finally, step 4, we create an action plan for each gap. We're talking clear deliverables and hard measures of success to actually get us across that gap.
Let's zoom in on that very first step for a second, capturing the current state. We can map out this as-is environment using a few different methods, basically depending on the kind of data we've got. On one hand, you've got your organization chart. This is a super effective, highly visual way to represent reporting structures and team dynamics. On the other hand, we have documented issues, reports, existing ways of working, things like that. These are absolutely fantastic for capturing data that maybe isn't so easy to visualize, but is totally critical if you want to understand the messy reality of how the business is currently running.
All right, Section 3, finding the root cause.
Okay, so we've surveyed the land. We know we have a gap between the current as-is state and our future goal. But why does that gap even exist in the first place? If we want to build a strong foundation, we have to dig deep. I absolutely love the iceberg metaphor for problem solving. Above the water, you've got your apparent issues. You know the ones: customer complaints, system errors, all the visible symptoms. But underneath the surface, masking much bigger, way more dangerous realities, are the underlying problems. So the whole point of root cause analysis is to dive beneath the surface to identify the fundamental reason for the problem.
And this brings us to a crucial point. Treating the apparent issues without addressing the underlying problems is simply not effective. Actually, it's often not even possible. Think about it. If we just patch up the surface issues, literally just the tip of the iceberg, without gathering data to figure out why they're happening, our metaphorical bridge is going to collapse. It's a guarantee. We have to define the problem, gather the evidence, and identify that true root cause.
Now, to comprehensively assess the whole environment surrounding our problem, we can run a SWOT analysis. This is a classic strategic tool that helps position a company by looking at 2 distinct environments. We take our internal factors, our strengths and weaknesses, and contrast them against external factors, our opportunities and threats. By mapping all of this out, we get a really clear picture of our internal capabilities to solve a problem versus the external market forces that might, either help us or hurt our progress.
But what about when we need to pinpoint a really specific problem hiding beneath the surface? For that, we use this incredibly effective, iterative technique called the 5 whys. It's exactly what it sounds like. You start with your problem statement, and you just ask why repeatedly. Each answer becomes the basis for your next question. Let's say, imagine the problem is that the revenue value in a database doesn't match the manual process revenue. Well, why? Because the back-end calculation matches the database, not the manual process. Okay, why? Because the extracted data is different. Why? Because manual entries were added that aren't in the system extraction. Well, why? Because those entries are only available after the month-end closing on the system. And boom, right there, you've hit the core issue.
Moving on to Section 4, visualizing processes with BPMN.
So once we understand our root causes and the gaps we need to cross, we need to draw up a highly accurate visual blueprint to map out our future solution. Enter BPMN, that stands for Business Process Model and Notation. Basically, just think of this as the standardized visual language of process design. It uses a very specific set of common notations so that anyone looking at the blueprint knows exactly what's going on. We've got activities or tasks, which represent the actual work being done. We use gateways to show decision points in the process. We've got terminators for the starting and ending points. And we house all of this inside pools. These represent the entire process model and contain all the participants, and they're usually divided into specific lanes for a single department or role.
And here's where it gets cool. Look at how those individual visual components just perfectly snap together. The lanes organize who is responsible for what, all the way from the procurement team down to the warehousing team. You can follow the start terminators, you can trace the connectors through the various task activities, and you can see exactly where the flow diverges at those decision gateways. What you get is a highly detailed, globally readable map of an entire complex business process. This right here, this is the blueprint for our bridge.
Finally, Section 5, the requirements lifecycle.
Now, as any good architect will tell you, building the framework isn't the end of the job. A truly successful, value-driven project requires continuous management from the very start to the absolute finish. This is what we call requirements lifecycle management, and it's made up of 5 critical, ongoing activities. The first of these continuous actions is to trace. This literally means tracing your ultimate design, your software code, and your test cases all the way back to the original requirements. Why do we do this? Well, because if a requirement changes down the line, we need to be able to instantly determine the impact of that change on every single piece of work that was anchored to it.
Next up, we must maintain those requirements. It is remarkably easy for documentation to just get totally out of hand on a large project. So maintaining simply means keeping the latest set of requirements in a consistent form. This ensures that every single stakeholder, whether they're a software developer or a top-level business executive, is looking at the exact same, most up-to-date version of the blueprint. Seriously, no one should ever be building off outdated plans. Then we prioritize. Because let's face it, not all improvements are created equal. We always have to take a value-driven approach that delivers real, tangible value to the customer. So prioritizing means actively ranking the requirements based on their importance. Doing this structurally aligns the project's momentum with the stakeholders' goals, and it guarantees that you keep their essential buy-in as the whole project moves forward. Now, because things always shift during a build, markets change, new data pops up, we have to continuously assess. This means evaluating the impact of any requested changes to the requirements. When a change request comes across your desk, you don't just blindly accept it. You do an impact analysis and you update your requirement priorities accordingly. This is absolutely critical to protect the integrity of the project. And finally, the life cycle demands that we approve. This loops us all the way back around to formally getting stakeholder sign-off on the requirements and the resulting design. It's the official handshake. The agreement that the blueprint is sound, the root causes have actually been addressed, and the bridge is finally ready to support the weight of the business.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with one really crucial thought. We've seen today that fixing a business requires a whole lot more than just jotting down what people say they want. It takes deep analysis. It takes identifying the true as-is state, finding those root causes hidden deep beneath the water, and strictly managing that blueprint life cycle from start to finish. So think about your next major project. Are you going to just patch up the tip of the iceberg? Or are you ready to use this toolkit to build a lasting structure based on fundamental truths? The choice is entirely yours. Keep building smart and keep analyzing.